Hi everyone, my name is Courtney and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a very, special recommendation video where I'm going to be recommending seasonal fantasy books that are specifically about elf, fae, seelie, or magical girls. So basically it is the end of summer, and since the fall on my channel I've been doing a seasonal reading vlog where I am looking at what people are recommending and using that to understand the season, how we think of it, how we recommend books around it, and reading said books and deciding if they are seasonally appropriate or not. And like I said, it is summer now, so I'm coming to the end of that reading journey. I'm about to start filming my summer reading vlog, and I feel like I now really understand the seasons, what we recommend, what to recommend, and one of the consistent things across all seasons is the fantasy genre. I have seen it recommended for all the seasons. As a fantasy fan myself, it feels appropriate to me. And one thing that I really notice is that fae, especially any kind of fairy fae, that has remained popular. It's just kind of like a hit topic right now. And so we're seeing a lot of books for it and a lot of recommendations because of that. And it's one of my favorite things too. Fae are just really interesting creatures, are connected to fairy tales. That's another big thing. They can be these beautiful magical creatures, but they also can be very devastating and just very powerful and very scary for a human to be interacting with. So it always makes a really interesting creature for a person to interact with in a story. And I think the other thing that ties into fae, fairy tales is the magical girl trope. And you see this a lot in fantasy where the young girl is having a self-discovery journey and the kind of magicalness, her abilities is used to kind of portray her coming into her own power, her growing as a person. And a lot of times she is, in these stories, connected to another magical being, a lot of times fae or fairy adjacent in some type of love romantic sense. And with a lot of these fairy fae books, like I said, they are consistently recommended through all the seasons. Fantasy's consistently recommended through all the seasons. And because of this, I feel like there is a either magical girl or fairy fae book that can be recommended for every single season. So today that is what I'm going to be recommending for you, is books for the season, seasonal fae and magical girl books. So I've actually broken this up into 8 categories. We're gonna start in high summer and of course head into fall, winter, and spring. But in between each, I'm going to have a transition book because I think there are a lot of good transition books that feel a little bit fall, feel a little bit summer, feel a little bit more of those transitional periods and not necessarily high summer, high winter kind of books. So yeah, I hope that made sense. That's what we're doing today. But we are going to start with high summer. Summer is the season that, again, I'm going to be doing a video on next. I feel like summer is very chaotic because it can encompass so many things. It can encompass nostalgia, this rambunctiousness, this freedom, but there's also, I believe, a darkness to summer. There's this heightened sense. There's this intensity because of heat. And so I've tried to pick the two sides of summer with my recommendations. For the more adventurous, fun, kind of spunky summer, I picked Howl's Moving Castle. I believe that all of Hayao Miyazaki's works are high summer in some respect, either the darker, more intense side or the more whimsical side, and this Howl's Moving Castle inspired one of his famous movies. This is very different than the movie. It's its own thing, but it's still very, very special to me. I've seen this book recommended for almost every season, I feel like, but for me, it is definitely a deep summer book. It's whimsical, it's charming, it has that middle grade kind of quality to it, and it's just a fun adventure type story. And Howl's Moving Castle fits into our fantasy, fae, magical girl category because it is about Sophie who gets cursed by a witch, and she has to undo her curse with her own power. She kind of discovers some magical powers in herself, and she is interacting with this magical wizard man. He's not fae, but he definitely has that kind of quality to him. He's very pompous, very much into his looks. I feel like that very much fits into the fae aesthetic. So otherworldly man and magical girl coming into her own powers. And then the other side of our deep summer, our more intense, our more maybe literary, is going to be Circe by Madeline Miller. This is about a Greek myth, and it is the retelling of the story of Circe, who is kind of a lesser demigod character in Greek myth. I believe she is not related in the ancestral sense, but connected to Hecate, who is the goddess of magic. Circe herself is a witch, and a demigod, and she's coming into her powers. This book is heartbreaking and wonderful, and again, it captures that like high intense kind of summer literary sense. It's set in Greece, obviously, because it's a Greek myth, so it has that heat, that warmth of the Mediterranean. I just feel like it's perfect for a witchy, summery book. And again, it's connected not to fairy tales, but to mythology. That seems to be in line for me for like what I'm looking for in my fae or magical girl kind of summer. Yes, two sides for our summer picks, a more intense one and a more magical one, but both of these scream summer to me, and I think they're both perfect recommendations for magical girl coming into her own powers and interactions with god, fae, fairies, mythology, all of that kind of good stuff that I want in a summer magical book. Our late summer, I feel like late summer is again kind of more that intense summer. It's going into fall, so there's a little bit of that coldness creeping in, the kind of ending of seasons, ending of the year, and I feel like this is specifically like the perfect fairy fae month, at that high intense summer that I kind of connect with like certain like fae activities, but also like the creeping in of colder, more like intense fairy tale kind of atmosphere of like winter and fall. And so for this season, I had to pick a very specifically very fae book, and for that I picked The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. A lot of people either really hate this or really like it. I fall somewhere in the middle. I really enjoyed the first two novels in the series. I thought the ending was not quite as strong. It felt like it needed a little bit more development, but I still think of the series very, very fondly. The Cruel Prince is about a set of twins. We focus in on Jude, but her and her twin and then their not stepsister, their half-sister have been transported to the world of fae when they are very young by their half-sister's father, who is a fae. He essentially killed their parents and kidnapped them and transported them to the world of fae, and they are trying their best to survive in this world that does not take kindly to humans, that kind of plays around with them. And I would say this series really focuses in on these like unlikable characters. The fae are pretty unlikable. They're doing pretty grotesque and awful things to each other and to the humans, and then our main characters are kind of taking in that kind of violence, that kind of harshness of the fae world, and they're really just trying to survive, and to do that in this world they just have to make cutthroat decisions. Jude especially is just like very cutthroat. I love Jude. I kind of love her harshness, her meanness, and if this isn't a magical girl coming into her own abilities, I don't know what is. She is not magical, but she just kind of fits into that. She definitely like finds herself fitting more into the fae harsh world than she does the human world, and I feel like that kind of fits into what I'm thinking about. And also, of course, the main love interest happens to also be a fairy prince, if you will, very much in line with what we're going for. So yes, not for everybody, but I feel like it definitely captures the kind of darkness of winter, fall, with also that deep summer kind of rambunctious energy. It fits that season in my brain so perfectly. Going into fall proper, we of course are going to be talking about Uprooted by Naomi Novik. This is another book I've seen recommended for spring and fall, but to me it falls more into the fall season. There is like a decaying evil forest that they have to fight. There is a girl coming into her own powers. There is like an otherworldly wizard man. A lot of similar elements that we're seeing in Howl's Moving Castle and some other picks, but there is this connection to fairy tales. There is this connection to something deeper and darker going on that pretty keenly for me sits in fall. It is not quite cold enough to be a winter book. I really need that coldness, but it does have like the unsettling nature of a season getting darker and scarier, which to me fits into the fall season. And this is honestly, I love Naomi Novik's work. I like what she does. I feel like she really understands the genre of girl coming into her own power really, really well. So if you're looking for something very connected to fairy tales, something about a scary forest, this is for you. To our transition between fall and winter, I picked up The Wolf and the Woodsman by Ava Reid. This has like more of the coldness, the harshness, the Eastern Europeanness that you will often see in like winter recommendations. There is a lot of snow in this book, but for me it's a little bit more transitional into winter, just because while there is the coldness, there's not like the really deep darkness, if that makes sense. It feels more fall atmosphere to me, or at least transitioning from fall into winter. Just like a little bit more brightness, a little bit more color to this world, if that makes sense. Maybe not quite as harsh. What I really liked about this novel is that there is like a harshness to it. The main character herself is just like very harsh and not dirty. I don't know. She's just very blunt. She's very to the point. there is like some, not horror elements, but knowing that this author has written novels that are more horror fantasy kind of based, it really makes sense to me where this book came from. But yes, there's a magical, not so magical girl coming into her own powers, a scary woods that she has to go through, a deep dark winter that is coming, and a man that is connected to magic. He's not a fae, but you know, there is some magicalness to him. But essentially she is being kidnapped or kind of auctioned off as a sacrifice to the kingdom. There's kind of like a pull and push dynamic between paganism and Christianity, or like monotheism. There's like this deep, dark, magical forest, fairy tale vibes. This is based on Hungarian folklore. And yeah, it fits into what we're thinking about for this specific brand of fantasy. And it also, again, it fits into that transition between fall and winter really, really well. Up next, we are going into deep winter to high winter, whatever you want to call it. For this is where the seasonal part I feel like really comes into recommendations. Of course, for like fall, you want more darkness, you want more of that like leaves changing. For spring, you want flowers blooming, you want more nature, things blossoming. Like seasons are important all year round, but winter, I feel like I cannot recommend the book as a winter book unless there is snow, unless there is ice, unless there is some kind of coldness, darkness to the book. For me, you're gonna see that in The Bear and the Nightingale and Spinning Silver, also by Naomi Novik. Bear and the Nightingale, Eastern European winter setting. You can't get much darker and colder and wintry than this series. The magical man, fae kind of creature is a winter spirit dude, like come on. And it's a girl coming into her own magical powers. There's again that push and pull between paganism and monotheism. Really excellent series, really dark, really harsh, really gruesome, but perfect for winter in terms of vibes and also setting. And Spinning Silver is the same way. There's that harshness, but there's also the setting, atmosphere, winter, icicles, coldness, isolation, all of that. And this is about 3 separate women. It's mainly focusing in on our main character, who is a Jewish-inspired money lender. And this is like the Rumpelstiltskin myth kind of retold in a fantastical setting. It's so good, so wintry, so yes, just perfect for winter. So now out of winter, we are transitioning into our transitional period between winter and spring. And so for this, I want a little bit of that winteriness, but maybe not as much harshness, a little bit more hope, a little bit more blooming, like all the winter vibes, but not necessarily the kind of cold, harsh, more, not graphic, but like, you know, the bitter, cold, more grimdark kind of stuff that you're gonna get in here. We are transitioning into more of the light winter, I guess. And for this, I picked Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fae. This book starts in November and goes through winter, so it's very much not in like that kind of February, March kind of season, but the vibes of this are like winter with a little bit more of the fun softness. For me, this wasn't like a perfect book. I didn't necessarily love how this author told the story, which is through journal entries. I would have liked a little bit more narrative without those kind of journal entries, but this book also was just a lot of fun. It's about a very uptight young woman who has a very big special interest in Fae, and she travels around going to different places, recording their stories, recording a place's different Fae, and now she has traveled to like the Arctic Circle in Norway, is recording their wintry Fae and encountering all of these like wintry stories and kind of getting herself entrapped in those myths and tales and kind of having to figure out a way out of them. And so it's very much her learning, growing, trying to become a better person, and it also has like that magical fae-ness. And of course the love interest that she's falling for is also, she suspects, and yes, is a fae. He has that very like Howl atmosphere to him, very like kind of punks about kind of personality. Both of them are a lot of fun. Them interacting, their dynamic together is a lot of fun. So this has like all of the funness of winter with kind of that darkness, that kind of harshness of the fae society and their interactions with humans, the connections to mythology and fantasy stories and fairy tales, while also just being a little bit lighter, a little bit more fun, a little bit more romantic perhaps, which to me is the perfect transition between winter and spring. Coming into spring, this is where I want to see the nature be a big part of the fae or magical aspects. I want that spring setting. I want that cottagecore atmosphere. I want romance and fun and hope and just the good spring vibes. And so for this, I picked picked The Poison Heart as our first book. So, editing Courtney here, and I made a grave mistake. I put both The Poison Heart and Half a Soul in my recommendations for spring, and I did not include a transitional book between spring and summer. This was my bad because The Poison Heart was supposed to be that transitional book. I just made an error, didn't read my chart correctly, whatever, and I just kind of lumped them both together. And so, yeah, we're missing the transitional thing, and I used The Poison Heart and more tied it with spring than summer. The reason why I would say it does have that summery quality to it is because it does have more of like an adventure plotline, especially the second book, and it just feels a little bit more warm, heat, adventure, summery time kind of vibes. So yeah, going into that, know this. Yes, it is very springy. You got all the magic, the nature, and all that, but it can be a transitional book as well. This is about a girl who has magical botany powers, and she discovers that she has inherited this house in the middle of the woods and kind of discovering her family's secrets. This is more like Circe connected to mythology, but there is that girl coming into her own powers. There is that romance between her and an otherworldly being with magical powers, and it is that story of a girl coming into her own powers, learning about her powers. Very much fits into, again, the theming that we are wanting, but also the setting of spring. So if you're looking for your spring read, this is going to be it. This has the magic, the romance, but if you're looking for a little bit more romance focused, and again, you're looking for that fae versus just a magical girl, you're going to be looking at Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater. This is basically Regency romance, fantasy romance, and it is about a young girl who had her soul taken away when she was a child, and that kind of makes her a little bit different, and she interacts differently with the world. It's very neurodivergent coded. So it's about her and her cousin going to London for the season. Her cousin is trying to set her up with the wizard, or like the Lord Sorcerer guy, because she wants to help her cousin get her curse cured. And meanwhile, our main character Dora is interacting with the Lord Sorcerer, but they have some shenanigans of their own, and they're trying to do all this other stuff. And the way that her curse comes back to play, the way that the fae comes to play in this series, it's just a lot of fun. So there is like a magical man, but the fae are not involved with that. The second book does have a fae love interest if you're looking for that, but for me, this book was so much fun, so great, so perfect for spring. It has that romance, that lightness, that magical whimsy, but again, if you want to go back, if you want that nature vibes, this might not have it as much as this one. So that's why I recommend both of these. So yes, I hope this recommendation video made sense. Girls coming into their own powers is especially one of my interests, and again, I just really like fae in stories, how that it can be utilized. I love mythology, I love fairy tales, and so I kind of wanted to take all of those fantasy tropes that I love and recommend some books based on different seasons. So hopefully you can find some new recommendations. Hopefully maybe you can look to your favorite season and find one that way. Because of my seasonal reading vlogs, I feel like I have a very definitive understanding of the seasons now, of what we recommend, so I hope this was fun, helpful, I don't know. And perhaps I should be doing some more seasonal recommendation videos in the future since I have done this whole project now. But yes, look forward to that final video, that summer reading vlog coming very soon. I know this video will be coming out before that, but if you have any more seasonal recommendation videos, especially in this specific subgenre of fantasy, I would love to know. It's my favorite thing pretty much. But yeah, that's gonna do it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys later, and happy reading.